Welcome to the Abundant Yogi Podcast. Our mission is to help you live your most happy, healthy, and abundant life possible. Inspired by yogic topics and philosophy, we share our own experiences navigating life and business as yogipreneurs. I'm Kagan Harvey, coming at you from Dubai.
And I'm Amethyst, coming at you from Canada. Here we'll talk about health, wellness, business, relationships, yoga, and everything in between that we believe help create and encompass a truly abundant life. Expect to have lots of laughs as we never take ourselves too seriously.
Whether you're a yoga teacher, practitioner, or just want to live a more abundant life, this is the podcast for you.
So get ready to open yourself up to new ideas, habits, and practices that will move you towards living your most abundant life.
Hello. Wow, synchronicity at its finest.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back
to the Abundant Yogi Podcast.
Yeah, episode number 3.
Today we are talking about imposter syndrome.
Yeah, which is a super interesting topic in my opinion, and I'm really excited to, just kind of dive into it because I think that it's something that will maybe resonate with a lot of people. It certainly resonated with me when I figured out what it was. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But before we get into that, I guess lots has happened since we actually recorded our last episode.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, I think we recorded it in like February or something.
Yep. And then life happened.
We were in the process of, figuring out how to launch. And yeah, so what have you been up to, Amethyst?
Well, I did that fundraiser that I mentioned in one of those 2 that we recorded already.
Yeah.
And yeah, it went well. I did not sell out the 70 tickets that I wanted, but that was for a reason because I discovered that 70 people would not have fit in that room.
Oh, really? How many people did you end up getting?
I think there was like 30.
Wow.
Like 30, 30 something bought tickets, and I think 30 or just under 30 showed up. But it was like any more than that, we would have had to rearrange some things because we had some vendors. Yeah, I had a couple of vendors there.
Cool.
Like selling stuff. Yeah. But yeah, it went well. We raised $1,010 for Win House Women's Shelters.
Nice. That's in Edmonton?
Yep. I think they have 3 shelters in Edmonton. So it's for women escaping like domestic violence.
Good for you. Yeah, I guess our last episode, which technically hasn't aired yet, but by the time we post this podcast, it will have aired. But our last episode was on fear. And so I guess you overcame any fear that was associated with that.
Yeah, I mean, I was like so nervous about it that morning. Well, I'm just leading up to it, like the weeks and the days, but then to be honest, it was like so busy. Like we had so much to do. My mom helped me like set everything up before everyone got there, and I kind of at that point just didn't even have time to be nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was good. And then like just getting it done. I don't know, we were like, I think even my mom helping me, we were like on a high for the rest of the day. Like everyone was just so happy to be there, and
yeah,
I don't know, it was a good time.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's like, after you run like a marathon, once it's done, you have that like elated feeling where you're just like on top of the world that you completed it.
For sure. And it was just also just nice because I had all these like to-do list things piling up in my head and on paper. And I was like, okay, I'm not focusing on anything else until this event is done. So it was like I could take a breath, relax for the rest of that day, and then next day get back to work.
Yes. That is so awesome. Good for you. So proud of you for that.
And then other than that, I don't know, the only other thing I guess worth mentioning is I taught beer yoga a couple days ago.
Oh my God, how was that?
It was funny. Like,
Ear yoga.
yeah, so it was at a pub. I didn't organize it. I just got randomly asked to teach it.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I practiced like earlier that day with like a glass of water, like, okay, how am I going to incorporate drinking beer into this yoga class?
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because I would like do sun salutations, and if they wanted to, they could lift the beer up. I'm like, okay, now bring your beer to heart center.
Oh my God.
But
Oh,
yeah,
that's so funny.
it
What
was
a
fun.
like strange but fun thing.
I know.
What did
During
like
the
what
cl
were people having fun or like what what was the vibe like?
Yeah, it was just like the lady told me, like it's not serious yoga, like just have fun. Like
Yeah.
people are just here to like do something different.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um, yeah, during the class I was like, I sure did not think I'd ever be doing this when I was taking my teacher training.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so
so
cool.
what
Love
have
it.
you been up to?
So funny you say that about, the feelings that you had like leading up to your event and then like the feeling that you had afterwards of just like sigh of relief. So I hosted my very first yoga retreat in March. So it was in Al Quwain, which is just outside of Dubai, a little emirate about an hour from here. So it was my first retreat, first time ever hosting a retreat. And the theme was Let Go and Create Space, which is based off one of the Yoga Sutras called Aparigraha. So essentially, that refers to non attachment and letting go, which I felt was a really good theme for a retreat because a lot of the suffering that we experience as human beings comes from our attachment to things that no longer are serving us. So, this could be attachment to relationships or careers or even material items. And the reason why it's dangerous to attach to things is because when we are attached to the outcome of something, or we're attached to a particular person or job or whatever the case may be, we kind of put these blinders on. And when we have these blinders on, we're not really looking for red flags and we're not really looking for reasons why this particular outcome might not necessarily serve us. And we're also closing ourselves off to opportunities that could be serving us or are more directly related to our divine path. So essentially, the retreat was an opportunity for people to first reflect and get honest about, what some of these things might be in their lives. And then, secondly, through yoga and meditation and sound healing, they can come to a place where they feel comfortable shedding some of those layers. So they have that ability to be more open to things that are for them. Yeah, so that went really well. I hosted it with another yoga teacher that I know here in Dubai, which I'm actually really happy that I hosted my first retreat with someone else just because it did take some of the nerves away, which, yeah, obviously with the first one, there was a lot of nerves associated with it just because you've never done it before and you want to make sure that people have a good experience. And yeah, all in all, anything new is scary. But like we talked about in our last episode, you just got to push through the fear. But yeah, so we had 5 people in total attend, which was a little bit less than what we anticipated. But again, like you said, Amy, in the end, it kind of all worked out because having a smaller group of people was just the perfect opportunity for us to kind of get our feet wet. And yeah, it was our first one. So I was happy with the number. In a nutshell, the retreat couldn't have gone any better. There's some things that I would do a little bit differently moving forward, but obviously that's part of the process of this is learning from our experiences and you know each retreat that we do moving forward will just continuously get better. So it was great, and I'm happy it's over with, and I'm looking forward to planning the next one. I also hosted my very first group sound healing session. Well, I shouldn't say very first, but first one that I had organized myself. So I went out and got a space and then advertised for it and had people show up. So my goal for this year was to try to host like at least one sound healing session monthly, one a month.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was my first one and it went well. I had 5 women show up for the first one, and then I had another one in March. That was end of February. So I had another one in March,
Hmm.
and then I'm hosting another one here at the end of April. And each one has, consecutively had more attendees. So it's
Oh,
growing, which
awesome.
is cool.
Yeah. So these aren't at yoga studios that you teach at?
No, they're not.
Oh,
They're
okay.
not. Yeah, they're just private events I've organized.
Well, that's awesome. So where
Yeah.
do you advertise?
So I've been advertising just on Instagram so far. For the first one that I did, for example, for the retreat and the first sound healing, I did like the Instagram paid ad. Funny enough, none of the participants came from the ad. So then the second time I did it, I just posted it to like my own Instagram and then had people share it. And then I gained enough traction that way. And I'm
Cool.
doing the same for this one as well. And then I have another event coming up that I've partnered with a girl, and we're going to do like I can say it because again, by the time the episode comes out, it will have already happened. But we're doing like a women's grounding afternoon. So essentially, they'll come and they will do like a gentle flow. We'll do some sound healing and then have like some healthy snacks and just refreshments and time to just connect and um, just kind of be around with like-minded people. So for that one, again, we're just on Instagram. And then I have a few contacts that I just send them on WhatsApp, and I found that that's been enough. But yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yay.
So is there anything else that you want to share?
I'm trying to think. It's been a while. I think those are the main ones. And then obviously we launched our podcast.
Oh yeah. That
So
happened.
that's a big one. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I know.
I'm
I
like, I'm excited to see where it goes because obviously, or I don't know about you, but like for me, I felt really nervous and like almost not embarrassed, but just like I guess this ties into our episode, Imposter Syndrome, but like just felt like I don't know, like what am I doing? Like why am I doing this? Or like I like that I don't have enough to share to be able to have a podcast. You know what I mean?
for
So
sure.
yeah, I've just been kind of
Yeah.
dealing
I
with
like
those emotions.
it's like I kind of feel the same, but I like try to completely ignore those feelings.
No, you're right. Yeah, so true. Well, I guess on that note, nice little segue.
Might as well get into it. All right. So, what is imposter syndrome?
It's the inability to believe that your success or like the things that you've accomplished are a result of your own efforts. So, in other words, you would attribute your success to like some external factor or minimize your efforts. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Like
Hmm.
for example, if you get a good grade on an exam, as an example, rather than believing that you got a good grade because you put in the work and you studied and blah blah blah, instead of believing that you got the good grade because of that, instead you might say something like, "Oh, but the test was really easy." You kind of just like shrug it off.
Yeah.
And like it can also show up as like the feelings of being a fraud, or if you're in a position that you feel like you're unworthy or undeserving of.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. That's
I
kind of
would
my example or my
for sure.
definition. What do you think?
So, like for me, it kind of manifests differently, more like being a fraud. So when I looked it
Yeah,
up, it did say like when you feel like you didn't deserve your successes,
yeah,
um, which is I think one way, but I think the other way that it can be. Um, is like being a fraud. So for example, like when I started teaching yoga, I just felt like I didn't didn't know enough to be teaching it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like if someone came to my class, they would think I was a fraud.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Totally. I felt
like
that too.
I literally thought that I was like paranoid. Like I thought that there was people that went around to classes to make sure that you're teaching properly. Like so that you don't give people injuries if you like cue
Like the
something
secret
wrong.
shopper, but like yoga
Yeah,
version.
exactly. Like no one had ever told me that that existed, but I'm like, it must be. Like, how can they just trust us to like tell people how to move their bodies? Like they could get hurt.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, for me it's definitely feeling like a fraud. Like
Yeah.
if I would go to someone's yoga class and like think they're such an amazing yoga teacher, then I'm like, oh, I don't teach like them. I must
Yeah.
not be a good yoga teacher.
For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. I felt the exact same thing, especially when I first started teaching, because you feel like, oh my God, this is so much information, first of all, and like the body is such like each person's body is so different. Which
Yeah,
is why
exactly.
even to this day in my classes, I'm very much about like being in tune with your own body and like if something doesn't feel right for you, like don't force it. Like obviously, I'll give you the alignment cues and I'll come around and adjust, but if something feels off, like just to not do it. But before I was just like, oh my God, like I can't even believe that I'm telling people what to do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and like it manifested a lot like when it came to my private sessions, for example, like charging money for doing a yoga session, I was so uncomfortable with that because I'm like, oh my
hmm
God, like I don't deserve or I'm not like smart enough or I don't know enough to be charging this. And it's like that
Yeah,
self-doubt or trickles in. And yeah, and you
for
have to
sure.
just kind of I guess we'll get into this with our tips for how to overcome, but like you kind of just have to like take a minute, step back and be like, no, wait a second. No, I'm certified for this. I know what I'm doing. I studied for this. Like I am worth this. Um, yeah.
Yeah. All right, should we get into our tips?
Yeah.
How many tips do we have? Six?
Um,
I have three.
I have three-ish, two-ish for sure. Maybe an extra one might be added in there.
Okay. So this is our 5.5 tips for helping with imposter syndrome. My first one. So recognize it and acknowledge it's a common experience. So I hadn't actually heard of imposter syndrome until like the last few years, I guess.
Mhm.
But it's something I have experienced since I started teaching yoga
Yeah.
and probably before that with other things. Um, but I didn't know that it was like a thing that everyone experiences.
Hmm.
So now that I do, I feel like that is a big thing in helping me deal with it, just knowing that it's normal and I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
And if those feelings creep in, just be like, okay, don't worry, it's just imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
It happens. It's not real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be my first tip.
Okay, that's a great one.
Yeah. It's
Um, I guess mine is kind of similar or adding on to that is that, that power of knowing that you're not alone or that you're not the only one. So one of my tips was just sharing it with someone that you trust. So like when you start to feel like, oh my God, I don't deserve this, or I shouldn't be here, or I'm not smart enough for this, or any of that like self-doubt that starts to come in, um, just share that feeling with someone that you trust, that knows you really well, because chances are they're going to stop you in your tracks and remind you of all the reasons why you are worthy of whatever it is. Or even just like you said, share that, they too sometimes have those feelings. So that sense of community or that you're not alone, I think is really powerful.
For sure. And that what yours kind of leads to my next one.
Whoa, Jill, look at that.
So, I have focus on your strengths and achievements. So,
hmm
like you said, like a friend might remind you of those things if you
Yeah,
share how you're feeling. And if you don't have a friend to remind you of those things, like remind yourself.
yeah.
I mean, write down the things you have achieved and have accomplished and like your
hmm
strengths and don't focus on where your weaknesses or where you're not as strong because like well, it depends what we're talking about, but if we're talking about a yoga class, like every yoga teacher is different and you're going to get different things from different yoga teachers. And just because you might not be like the way that you think you should be, you have something to offer and
Yeah,
people are gonna people are going to see that.
absolutely. I once had this teacher of mine when I was going through my sound healing training because I was really afraid, like, oh my God, like, what if I make a mistake while I'm, using the bowls or whatever? And she said, um, one or your mistake is someone else's healing. And I just thought that
Hmm.
was so profound and so true because I guess it goes back to the same thing as like one person's trash is another person's treasure. Like you have no idea like what is going to be valuable to somebody else. So whether that be,
Hmm.
your specific yoga class or your style of teaching, who are you to decide that that's what someone else will or will not find value in,
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
Um, yeah,
Even if it was like a obvious mistake, I
yeah,
just thought of this, then people are like, "Oh, like it might real make people feel better about themselves, be like, "Oh, she's not
yeah,
perfect either."
exactly. So
Hmm.
yeah, so just to kind of humanize can cause a lot more connection in your class with your students for sure. Yeah, the other one that I had was journaling it, or I guess actually challenging it and then writing it down and journaling. So challenging it in the sense that, like, say, for example, you're in that class, or I don't know, we're using yoga as an example, but it can be anything. Um, and or you're giving a presentation and you're like, oh God, like I don't know enough. I'm not a good public speaker and like all these things, like I shouldn't be doing this speech. Right? Like instead, acknowledge that you're having that feeling. Acknowledge that, okay, this is something that, many people experience. Acknowledge it and then challenge it. So instead of thinking of all the reasons why you shouldn't be doing something or that you don't deserve it or that, it's not because of your success or whatever, flip the narrative and start writing down all of the reasons why you should be here. Okay, I've rehearsed for this. I've practiced for this. I know my shit. I whatever. Like journal all of the reasons why you are deserving. And eventually you'll start to remind yourself like, okay, yeah, I'm here for a reason. It's not just because I'm a fraud or whatever.
Yeah.
So I used to feel this a lot actually in my HR and corporate days, especially because, when I worked in some of those jobs, I was in my early 20s and I was female working in a predominantly male environment. And yeah, although the position that I had was a very important role, I was still like perplexed by some of the projects that would come across my desk because, they're high stake projects critical to the function of the business. And I just couldn't believe that they were being given to me, like that I was being trusted to handle these really critical projects. And, that imposter syndrome is what crept in and gave me that self doubt that, like, no, I'm not capable of this. But in reality, I was. And obviously, my employer knew that, hence why they were giving me all these jobs to do. They trusted that I was capable to do them. But I didn't, it was like in my mind, I was like, how can I possibly be the one handling this? I had to catch myself a lot. And
Hmm.
I don't, whether this is a good example or not, but I often sometimes just say, like, fake it till you make it. And
Hmm.
I don't mean that in any like negative, with any negative connotation. I genuinely mean like it's like practice makes perfect or practice makes progress. The more that you quote unquote fake it, eventually you will just start to get comfortable and will start to believe that, oh, okay, yeah, I am capable of this or I am deserving of this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like from your example, like it also goes to show that the way you see yourself is completely different than how other people see you.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's so
like, there's
true.
obviously a reason that they trusted you to do all these things because they knew they could count on you.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
did have one more.
Oh, okay. What's your last one?
My
Before I
last one
just
is
segue onto the next.
my last one was just to remember that everyone starts somewhere. So I guess
Yeah.
it's kind of similar to our past ones, but I mean,
Mhm. So relevant for our podcast as well.
yeah, exactly. Like, I'm sure a lot of podcasts we listen to, if we go back to their first episode, it's
Yeah.
probably sounds a lot different.
No, it's so true. And, actually, obviously, once the first episode aired, I talked a lot to my family and my close friends who listened to it. And one of the things that really stuck was, um, I think it was my sister-in-law that said, you know, I listen to podcasts all the time, and whenever you listen to the first one, she's like, they're always just trying to find their footing, like, so she's like, it's normal, like everybody starts somewhere, and
Yeah.
that just really resonated and made me feel like a lot less, I guess, nervous or insecure about it, because I'm just
Hmm.
like, yeah, and it's exciting to think of, okay, this is our third one, but imagine where we'll be by our 100th one.
Yeah, exactly. Like, at least we're doing it. A lot
We're
of
doing
people
it.
are afraid to even try, but we're
100%.
we're putting ourselves out there for your
Exactly.
judgment.
Yeah, yeah. Which we did mention last week or last episode, in our episode on fear was just to just do it, I think it was, right? Or start one of
Yeah,
them.
that was one of them.
So that's what we did. We followed our own advice, guys. And guess what? Here we are.
So I'm gonna do a quick recap of our tips just
Yeah,
so people can remember.
good idea. Get your pens out.
So number one, recognize it and acknowledge it's a common experience.
So number two was sharing it with someone you trust.
Number three, focus on your strengths and achievements.
Number four was journaling about it and then challenging yourself on it.
Number five, remember everyone starts somewhere. I wanted to say, because in our first episode, we said every week at the end that we have new
Right,
episodes, but it's every second Wednesday that we will be um, coming out with our new episodes.
right. Yeah. Anyways, thanks so much for listening, guys, and I hope that you got something from this episode.
Yeah, thank you. See you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Abundant Yogi podcast. This podcast allows us to step into our passion of helping others, so we hope that you can take away from what we share and be inspired to bring abundance into your own life because you deserve it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe or follow and leave us a review. Leaving a review helps us become more discoverable for other people on the path of living more abundantly. Once again, we thank you and wish you so much love. Until next time.